Welcome back to The Unraveling, where we dig into the moments that shatter perfectly constructed lives. This story isn't about a late-night text or a stray lipstick mark. No, this one began with a whisper of stale air, a broken air conditioner, and the chilling realization that some secrets hum louder than any machine. What if everything you thought you knew about your partner was merely an illusion, meticulously maintained? Elias Lowell, a man whose life often felt as orderly as his precisely ironed shirts, was accustomed to the silence of their seldom-used guest room. For 2 summers, the old window unit had been a dormant monument to forgotten plans, Gianna always dismissing its repair with a wave of her elegant hand. Just leave it, Elias. We never use that space. So imagine his surprise one ordinary Wednesday evening when he walked through the threshold of his meticulously kept townhouse. The front door was barely closed behind him, keys still cold in his palm, and a low, persistent whirring reached him from the back of the house. The guest room, the air conditioner. It was on, sputtering and forcing a chill into a space that hadn't hosted a soul in over a year. He didn't step inside. He just stood in the hallway, captivated by the mechanical drone, a sliver of light escaping the slightly ajar door. No voices, no rustling, just the mechanical hum, thick and unnatural, and something else, a faint, opulent perfume. It was an unfamiliar floral note, undeniably expensive, a stark contrast to the bright, citrusy scent Gianna usually borrowed from her sister. Could one innocent sound unravel an entire existence? 10 seconds later, Gianna Wells emerged, a vision of composure in a silk robe, a half-empty goblet of deep red wine cradled in her slender fingers. Her jet-black hair was pulled back in a loose, artful bun, but a few strands clung to her temples, a tiny detail Elias, with his observant nature, didn't miss. She offered a casual smile, explaining she was organizing the old armoire. Elias, his gaze steady, inquired about the air conditioner. Gianna blinked, her sharp features momentarily softening in feigned surprise. "Oh, that! It got stifling in there, so I flipped it on." Except the remote control, the only way to activate the defunct unit, had been missing for months. Elias simply nodded, betraying nothing. And in that quiet acknowledgement, the meticulously constructed facade began to crack. He knew. But here's the unexpected part. The truth no one ever tells you about betrayal. Elias didn't erupt. He didn't hurl accusations. He didn't dissolve into tears. He simply waited. Days bled into a strained week before Gianna announced her invitation to an old friend's birthday gala. Miles Croft, her ex, the one she'd repeatedly claimed had nearly demolished her life, swearing she'd never look back. This wasn't just any party. It was the kind that stretched beyond midnight, blurring the lines of innocent celebration into the hazy, permissive hours. That evening, Gianna slipped into a crimson silk gown Elias hadn't realized she still possessed, a daring backless number that shimmered with every subtle movement. Her jet-black hair, usually a cascade, was swept into an intricate, elegant chignon, a style he hadn't seen her wear since their engagement photos. She left the townhouse without a backward glance, without a whispered, "Will you be awake when I get home?" She didn't come home, and while she undoubtedly twirled in the arms of her past, her laughter echoing too loudly, her lips sipping wine that wasn't from their cellar, Elias remained. But he didn't just sit there, consumed by the creeping chill of suspicion. Here's what Elias did instead. He began to dismantle their world, brick by deliberate brick. The next day, as Gianna stumbled through the front door, the same wrinkled red dress now clinging to her body like a second skin, heels dangling from one hand, a desperate attempt at nonchalance etched across her exhausted features, she was met with an absolute unnerving stillness. This isn't just silence. It's the profound calm before a storm shatters everything. Her tangled hair, smudged lipstick, and the lingering, cloying scent of cheap champagne all spoke of a night she wished to erase. But the house itself held the weight of an irreversible transformation. Elias, unwavering, offered no greeting. He didn't need to. Her eyes, clouded with a hangover, darted immediately to the hallway, to the grand oak frame wall that had once proudly displayed their shared history. Gone. Every candid vacation snapshot, every celebratory birthday portrait, every lazy Sunday morning in bed, every meticulously curated image of their so-called journey had vanished. In their place, 6 stark, empty nail holes were drilled into the pristine plaster. Deliberate declarations of absence. It was the first undeniable strike. Gianna blinked, confusion warring with a burgeoning dread. Her voice, raspy from a night of revelry, finally broke the unnerving quiet. "Where are the pictures?" Elias, calmly stirring a fresh cup of artisan coffee in the kitchen, glanced up. "Oh, those. I removed them. Found it rather exhausting, living in a museum of untruths." A strange, broken chuckle escaped Gianna's lips, brittle as glass. "Is this really about Miles? Seriously, Elias?" He didn't respond. Instead, he simply gestured toward the sleek, minimalist coffee table in the dining area, where a thick, unmarked manila envelope lay in stark relief against the polished wood. She moved slowly, her eyes narrowing, the last vestiges of her feigned bravado draining away with each measured step. Inside, pristine and damning, was a printed email. Not from her, but from Miles Croft himself. Gianna read it once, then again, her lips moving silently as she processed his words. They were disarmingly matter-of-fact, a casual thank you note to Elias for lending Gianna for the evening, remarking that she clearly needed the nostalgia, and concluding with a deceptively charming line, "You're braver than I'd ever be, letting her go like that." She dropped the envelope as if it had seared her fingertips. "You went through my email?" she accused, her voice trembling. "No," Elias replied, his tone devoid of emotion. "He sent it to me directly." The color visibly drained from her face, leaving her complexion ashen. "Why would he?" "Because," Elias stated, "I asked him to." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then Elias finally released the burden he'd carried, a truth he'd held like a stone in his chest. "I needed to know if you go through with it, and you did. No hesitation. You even smiled in the photos." Gianna flinched, a sharp, involuntary movement. "You saw?" "I saw enough." She stumbled backward, collapsing into the nearest dining chair, the crumpled red dress a stark contrast to the quiet devastation unfolding around her. It wasn't just an argument. It was the inevitable, brutal fallout. The room, which had seemed unnaturally still moments before, now felt impossibly colder. Or perhaps, Elias mused, she was finally beginning to feel the true, crushing weight of her actions. And here's the devastating twist. Elias hadn't even revealed the full extent of his actions. What he'd done while she was gone wasn't merely petty retaliation. It was permanent, and she was seconds away from realizing it. For nearly a full minute after Elias's quiet revelation, Gianna remained speechless, her gaze fixed on him as if trying to decipher a forgotten language. A part of her, he sensed, still clung to the illusion that this was simply about Miles, a wound to his pride that he would eventually, inevitably overcome. But the moment he mentioned her phone backup, something profound shifted. The carefully constructed bravado she'd used as a shield against reality crumbled into the suffocating silence. "I don't know what you think you saw," she finally managed, her voice a fragile whisper, laced with a forced, desperate calm. Elias stepped back from the table and retrieved his sleek tablet from the kitchen island. The screen was already active. He turned it, the luminous display reflecting her shocked face. There it was, the synced folder, bursting with autosaved videos. Not from last night, not even recent, but a meticulously organized timeline spanning the entire past year. Names Elias didn't recognize flashed in the titles, locations he had never visited. In the most damning detail, some of the clips weren't even recorded by her. They were received. Her hands shot out, a desperate instinct to shield her eyes from the damning evidence, to perhaps even close the screen. But Elias gently, firmly intercepted it. "Don't," he commanded, his voice flat. "You don't get to hide now." She recoiled as if the tablet itself had bitten her. "You shouldn't have gone through my private belongings." "You were sending yourself through it," Elias countered, his tone hardening. I merely opened the door you left gaping wide. She sank back into the chair, the carefully maintained facade finally collapsing under an unbearable weight. I never intended for things to escalate this far. Elias let out a bitter, hollow laugh, the kind that rises from a place where hope has long since withered. You were betraying me long before I even suspected there was anything to worry about. And now you stand there, trying to convince me that Miles was some isolated, regrettable lapse? Gianna looked up, tears finally streaming down her face. But it wasn't the kind of sorrow that evoked sympathy. It was raw, desperate, and laced with an ugly, self-preserving panic. I was angry. I felt utterly invisible. And I was stupid, she choked out. Elias leaned in close, his voice a low, chilling whisper that sliced through her sobs. Stupid enough to believe loyalty would guarantee respect. He paused, then delivered the final, crushing blow. This wasn't revenge, Gianna. This was simply your routine. And by the way, he added, pulling back, I've already forwarded those videos to your sister, your mother, and your managing partner. She gasped of a sound like a physical blow. You didn't dare. I did. Her phone, lying abandoned on the table, lit up at that precise moment. The deluge had begun. Ready to witness the immediate devastating ripple effect of a meticulously planned disclosure? Here's what happened next. The moment Gianna's phone illuminated, Elias saw the instantaneous shift. Her entire posture changed, her spine seemingly liquefying. She stared at the screen, blinking hard, then swiped with fingers that visibly trembled. One unread message, then three, then eight. Her mouth moved, forming unspoken words, but nothing emerged. Elias watched her eyes skim the preview of the first message. Then, with a faint clatter, she dropped the phone onto the polished wood floor as if it had delivered a powerful electric shock. Why would you do that? She whispered, her voice so thin it was barely audible above the sudden, oppressive silence. Elias didn't respond immediately. His gaze drifted to the corner, to a broken photo frame that had lain there for months, knocked off the wall during a heated argument she had never bothered to retrieve. It used to hold their wedding portrait. She had since replaced it with a generic print of some distant mountain range they had never visited. I did it, Elias finally said, his voice measured and calm, because the man you betrayed would have merely wept in the shower for 3 weeks, pretending everything was fine. I am no longer that man. Gianna scrambled to retrieve her phone, clutching it with both hands. I need to fix this, she mumbled, pacing in frantic circles, swiping through apps as if she could simply delete reality itself. My job. My mother will disown me. What exactly did you send them? The truth, Gianna. Nothing more, nothing less. Her fingers flew across the screen, desperately attempting to dial someone. Probably her sister, the one who often boasted about how Gianna always lands on her feet. Not this time. Her calls went straight to voicemail. Elias knew they would. People talk, especially when what they've witnessed is impossible to unsee. She spun toward him, her eyes wide and wild with a burgeoning horror. You've utterly ruined me. No, Elias corrected, his voice firm. I merely stopped protecting the fabricated version of you insisted on selling to everyone else. She slumped against the sleek kitchen counter, her legs seemingly giving out beneath her. You don't understand. This wasn't just cheating. It was supposed to be temporary, a desperate way to feel something again. You mean to feel wanted? Elias interjected, his gaze piercing. So you exchanged me for fleeting attention, again and again and again. She was sobbing harder now, ugly, ragged sounds. But Elias remained unmoving. He felt the phantom pull, that old ingrained instinct to hold her, to comfort her, to whisper empty promises that they would figure it out. But that instinct had died, somewhere between video number 2 and the chilling contents of the folder discreetly labeled locked. Then came the sharp, insistent rap on the front door. Gianna froze, her desperate efforts ceasing instantly. Elias already knew who it was, and he knew that the next 10 seconds would completely flip her already shattered world upside down in a way he hadn't even warned her about yet. She didn't move when the knock echoed through the quiet townhouse. She just stared at the door, as if willing it to disappear. Elias didn't prompt her. He didn't even look at her. He simply walked over, calm as ever, and pulled the door open. It was Rowan. Gianna hadn't seen him in years. Elias hadn't seen him in months. Her old co-worker, briefly his too. The kind of man you remember not just for his polite smile, but for the subtle unease he always seemed to evoke. Elias had never liked him, not because he was boisterous or arrogant, or one of those men who constantly touched your arm when they spoke. No, Elias had disliked him because years ago, he'd witnessed the specific way Rowan looked at Gianna. And once, just once, he'd seen her look back. Rowan Sinclair stood there, a tired resignation etched across his face, a folded piece of paper held loosely in his hand. No trace of smugness, no performance, just a slow, heavy exhale. "I told you this would happen," he said, not to Elias, but directly to Gianna. Gianna blinked, her face flushing crimson with a fresh wave of panic. "Rowan, what are you doing here?" He held up the paper. "You left this in my car the night Miles bailed on you." She froze, her throat constricting. Elias could almost hear her heart hammering from across the silent room. Rowan then met Elias's gaze. "You were right to send those videos. She didn't stop with Miles." And just like that, Gianna's world completely gave way. She lunged forward, a desperate, animalistic lunge to snatch the paper, but Rowan sidestepped and handed it to Elias. He unfolded it slowly. An appointment confirmation, a hotel receipt, and a printed message that cut deep. "You're different. I don't feel invisible with you." No name, just her initials. "I didn't mean to," Gianna stammered, but her voice cracked mid-sentence. "You didn't mean for it to catch up with you," Elias calmly corrected. "Big difference." She whirled on Rowan. "You had no right. I gave you 6 chances to stop," Rowan interrupted, his voice hollow. "You used me as an escape. You never once considered if I had something to lose." Elias looked at Rowan. "Why bring this now?" Rowan hesitated, his eyes shadowed with pain. "Because I just lost my fiancée. She found the messages too. Figured if my life was burning down, I might as well toss a match on the truth here." Gianna reeled back as if physically struck. "Rowan!" He turned, his shoulders slumping, and walked away before she could utter another word. And here's the kicker. The final blow, the one that shattered her last delusion, had nothing to do with Elias at all. The silence that followed Rowan's departure was somehow more deafening than any of the brutal revelations that day. Gianna was shaking now, not crying, but a deep, uncontrollable tremor. Because it wasn't just Elias who saw her now. It was everyone. Everyone who mattered, and the person she believed would always remain her secret. He had shown up at their front door. "I can't fix this," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "No," Elias said, walking past her toward the elegant staircase. "You can't." And upstairs, a packed suitcase was waiting. But not for her. She didn't follow him immediately. Perhaps she clung to the lingering hope that he was bluffing, that he'd retreat, cool off, then return downstairs to demand a conversation. But those days were irrevocably over. Elias reached the master bedroom, pulled a sleek, carry-on suitcase from the deep walk-in closet, and unzipped it with a sense of calm he barely recognized in himself. It was already packed. Not for Gianna, not for a dramatic, vengeful exit scene, but for his own clarity. He wasn't leaving the house. He was leaving us. Downstairs, he heard her frantic pacing. Finally, her voice, thinner and more brittle by the second, called out, "Elias, what in the world are you doing?" "I'm going to stay with my brother for a few weeks," he announced, his voice carrying clearly down the stairs. "You'll have the townhouse to yourself." No answer, just an abrupt silence. Then the distinct sound of her rushing up the stairs. When she saw the single, perfectly packed suitcase resting on the bed, she froze, her breath catching. You're leaving me?" "I'm leaving the wreckage," Elias corrected, his gaze unwavering. "Whether you choose to remain in it or not is entirely your decision." She stepped into the room slowly, hesitantly, as if it no longer belonged to her. In many profound ways, it didn't. "What am I supposed to do?" she pleaded, her voice cracking again, the raw panic back. "Everyone despises me. My sister won't even take my calls. My job is hanging by the thinnest thread. I've ruined everything. No, Elias said, zipping the suitcase shut with a definitive snap. You threw it all away. There's a crucial difference. Her eyes scanned the room, once so familiar, now utterly alien. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt remotely recognizable. I never planned for any of this to happen, she whispered, a desperate plea for understanding. You planned enough, Elias replied, his voice soft but unyielding. You meticulously packed lies into every hidden corner of our life and simply hoped I'd never open the drawers. That truth hit her with devastating force. She sat down slowly, heavily, on the edge of the bed, no longer crying, just quiet, utterly defeated. Elias, are you going to divorce me? He didn't answer immediately. He sat down opposite her, and for the first time that day, looked her directly in the eye. I don't know yet, Gianna, but I know with absolute certainty that I cannot stay in this house and pretend I still recognize who you are. She swallowed hard, a visible effort. You're not even angry anymore. I was, Elias admitted. But then I realized that being angry meant I still cared enough to expect more from you. He stood, grabbed the suitcase, and walked toward the bedroom door. She remained motionless, a figure of silent despair, offering no protest, no plea. She sat there like someone who finally understood that the house wasn't the only thing being emptied. At the bottom of the grand staircase, Elias paused and looked back up. I turned the picture frame sideways for months. You never noticed, he said softly, a final, poignant observation of their fractured reality. Then he walked out, and this time he wasn't the one who had to look back. It's a peculiar thing, the quiet clarity that follows such devastation. No pyrotechnics, no theatrical confrontations, just a profound, pervasive stillness. 3 weeks have passed since Elias Lowell walked out of that townhouse. Gianna never tried to stop him. Honestly, he suspected she knew better. He'd settled into his brother's guest room, a humble space filled with mismatched towels and the rhythmic hiss of an old radiator. And yet somehow he slept better there than he had in his own bed for the better part of a year. She emailed once, not to beg, not to accuse, just a single stark line. I'm truly sorry. I never, ever expected you to be the one who finally walked away. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. In the time since, Elias has begun to reclaim the passions he'd set aside. Activities that defined him before his identity became entirely enmeshed with their marriage. He meticulously repaired the antique road bike in his brother's garage. He joined a local urban photography collective, something he'd always yearned to do but never found the time for. He even visited a quaint weekend market and purchased a new, elegantly simple picture frame. This time, he filled it with a candid photo of himself, a genuine smile gracing his lips. He doesn't know if Gianna Wells will manage to rebuild her life. Perhaps she will, perhaps she won't. But that weight, that responsibility, is no longer his to bear. He isn't bitter. He isn't broken. He is simply free. And, in a strange, unexpected way, he's profoundly grateful. Because if she hadn't spent that night at Miles Croft's party, if she hadn't made her betrayal so undeniably, unequivocally clear, Elias might still be standing in that crooked hallway, clinging to the ghost of something that had long ceased to exist. Now he lives differently. He notices when the frames go askew, and he fixes them. This is more than a story. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the cleanest break is the one that finally lets the light pour in.